The radical left has finally been backed into a corner where their slogans cannot save them. You have seen the headlines and you have heard the chants, but you have never seen a reckoning quite like the one that unfolded in that hearing room. Stay with me until the very end, because I am going to reveal the exact moment the mask slipped for good. I promise you will see the chilling truth about whose interests are actually being served in the halls of our Congress. This is not just about one representative, but about the soul of our nation and the safety of our greatest ally. The winter light was cutting through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the House Oversight Committee room on January 16th. The air was thick with the kind of tension you only feel when a long-awaited confrontation is finally about to boil over. Red lights on the C-SPAN cameras glowed like warning signals while a packed gallery watched in total silence. Jewish advocacy groups filled the front rows with their eyes fixed on the dais where the future of the Republican Party was waiting. Scattered throughout the room were the remaining supporters of the squad, but they were quiet and clearly outnumbered. The placards on the table read "Confronting Anti-Semitism in America" in bold black letters. Sitting on the Republican side was Congressman Byron Donalds of Florida, a man who embodies the American dream and the strength of our convictions. Raised in Brooklyn by a single mother, he knows exactly what it means to work hard and protect what you love. He walked away from the Democratic Party in 2010 because he saw the rot starting to set in even then. Now he was staring directly at the person who represents everything he refused to be a part of. Across from him sat Rashida Tlaib, the Palestinian-American congresswoman who had been censured by the House just months prior. She is often called the most toxic presence in the halls of government, and even her own party has struggled to stand by her. 22 Democrats had crossed the aisle to vote for her censure because her rhetoric had become impossible to defend. Donalds looked down at his notes containing her own videos and her own words defending those who wish us harm. He looked up with a sharp Brooklyn smile that signaled he was not there to play games. Congresswoman Tlaib, his voice was calm, but it carried the weight of a hammer. Let us talk about what from the river to the sea really means for the people involved. Chairman Comer banged the gavel to recognize the gentleman from Florida for 30 minutes of questioning. Those 30 minutes were destined to be a long overdue reckoning for someone who has spent years testing our patience. Donalds did not ease into the conversation, but instead reached for the folder containing House Resolution 845. On November 7th of 2023, the House of Representatives voted to censure you for your conduct. Is that a correct statement of fact, Congresswoman? He asked with surgical precision. Tlaib shifted in her seat and adjusted her microphone while trying to pivot to her usual talking points. She began to speak about Islamophobia and anti-Arab hate as if that would shield her from the evidence. Donalds held up a hand in a gesture that was polite yet firm enough to stop her in her tracks. I asked a simple yes or no question: did the House pass a resolution censuring you? Please take a moment to hit that subscribe button and leave a comment below to let us know if you think our leaders should be held to a higher standard. We need your voice to keep the truth moving forward in this fight for our country. The silence in the room lasted for 5 long seconds as the camera shutters clicked away like gunfire. Finally, she whispered a single word of affirmation that she had indeed been censured by her peers. Donalds picked up the vote tally sheet and noted the bipartisan nature of that historic condemnation. He pointed out that it was not just Republicans, but 22 of her own Democratic colleagues who voted to condemn her. These were people who usually vote with her and caucus with her every single day. Why did your own party abandon you in that moment? He asked while leaning forward to close the gap between them. Tlaib tried to blame pro-Israel lobbying groups for the pressure they allegedly put on her fellow Democrats. Donalds countered by pointing out that even progressive members who usually defend the squad could no longer look away. They looked at her actions and decided they could not provide cover for her rhetoric any longer. He asked her again why the very people she works with decided she was a liability to the nation. Tlaib claimed the political climate around the Middle East had become too toxic for factual criticism of the Israeli government. Donalds responded by showing the room exactly what she was actually censured for on that day. He played a video from her own social media where protesters were marching and chanting for the end of Israel. Her own voiceover was heard accusing President Biden of supporting a genocide against the Palestinian people. The chant echoed through the hearing room as the images of waving flags filled the large screens. He stopped the video and looked her in the eye to remind her those were her own words and her own posts. He asked what part of that was false information or the result of outside pressure, since she created it herself. Tlaib argued the video was merely a call for a ceasefire to save innocent lives in a war zone. Donalds corrected her by stating it was a call for the total elimination of a sovereign state. He quoted the Anti-Defamation League, which calls that specific phrase a rallying cry for terrorist organizations. The American Jewish Committee has stated that those words mean erasing the state of Israel and its people from the map. Hamas uses that exact phrase, and they are the ones who murdered 1,400 people on October 7th. They are the ones who raped women and beheaded babies while taking hundreds of innocent hostages. Donalds asked her why she was using the same language as a group that committed such atrocities. Tlaib tried to claim the phrase has different meanings to different communities as an aspirational call. Donalds cut her off to break down the geography of the Jordan River and the Mediterranean Sea. He explained that the area described encompasses the entire country of Israel with no room for its existence. That phrase does not include a Jewish state continuing to exist, and she knew that better than anyone. He asked her point blank if her vision included Israel remaining on the map, but she remained silent. The silence stretched for 10 seconds as she looked toward the ranking member for help that was not coming. If you believe in the truth and want to see more of these investigations, please subscribe to the channel and share your thoughts in the comments. Your support helps us bring these vital moments to light when the mainstream media turns away. Congresswoman, you cannot answer because we both know the answer is no, he said with a tone of utter disgust. That is why 70 of your own Democratic colleagues signed a statement rejecting that hateful rhetoric. That is why the ADL calls it anti-Semitic, and why your own party felt the need to formally censure you. He stacked the resolution and the vote tally neatly on the table, as if closing a chapter on her excuses. He reminded her that she represents the people of Michigan and the citizens of Detroit and Dearborn. Yet when Hamas attacked on October 7th and burned families alive, she did not offer a clear condemnation. He pulled out her statement from October 8th, which was released only 24 hours after the worst attack on Jews since the Holocaust. He read her words aloud where she grieved lives on both sides without mentioning the word terrorism once. He noted that she put the victims and the murderers in the same sentence as if they were morally equivalent. He accused her of blaming the victims for their own massacre while the blood was still fresh. Tlaib tried to argue that the occupation creates conditions where violence becomes an inevitable result of the situation. Donalds hardened his voice and reminded her that Israel completely withdrew from Gaza in the year 2005. They left every soldier and every settler behind to give the people their full autonomy and a chance at peace. Instead, the people elected Hamas, a terrorist organization that used aid money to build tunnels instead of schools. He pointed out that when Israel defends its citizens, she is the first one to call it a genocide. The other Democrats in the room stared at their papers and shifted uncomfortably in their expensive leather chairs. Donald stood up and walked to the side of the dais to look at her without the barrier of the desk. He reminded her that the people who usually protect the squad had decided that she had finally crossed a line. They defended Omar and they defended Ocasio-Cortez, but they could not find a way to defend her support for terror. He sat back down and took his time to let the weight of the moment sink into the room. Mr. Chairman, I would like to enter the full censure resolution and the bipartisan vote tally into the official record. There was no objection, as Donalds looked back at a witness who was already starting to look defeated. He told her they were just getting started and pulled out a much thicker file from a few years ago. He went back to May of 2019 to a podcast where she spoke about the history of the Holocaust. He'd prepared to read her own words about the murder of 6 million innocent Jewish people. I am going to stop this part of the transcript right here, as we have reached the first 2,000 words of this intense reconstruction. The room was so quiet, you could hear the faint hum of the air conditioning as Donalds opened the next folder. He looked at Tlaib and noted that he had been saving these specific records for a moment exactly like this one. He took the committee back to May 2019, referencing a podcast where she discussed the darkest chapter of human history. He read directly from the transcript, quoting her saying there is always a kind of calming feeling when she thinks of the Holocaust. Donald stopped reading and let that word calming hang in the air like a thick fog. He asked her how anyone could feel calm thinking about 6 million souls being gassed, starved, and burned in ovens. Tlaib immediately grew defensive, claiming her words were being taken out of context by her political enemies. Donalds didn't budge, repeating her exact quote and asking how such a statement could ever be misinterpreted. She tried to explain that she was referring to her ancestors providing a safe haven for Jewish refugees. Donalds looked at her with a look of pure disbelief before calling that claim a flat-out lie. He pulled out historical documents showing that the Palestinian leader during that time was actually a Nazi collaborator. He held up photographs of the Grand Mufti of Jerusalem meeting with Adolf Hitler in Berlin in 1941. He detailed how that leader organized tens of thousands of Muslim troops to form Nazi SS divisions to murder Jews. The record showed the Mufti even had a radio show in Berlin where he told Arabs to kill Jews on sight. Donalds pointed out that instead of a safe haven, there were riots and efforts to stop Jews from escaping to the region. If you are tired of the history books being rewritten by radical activists, make sure to subscribe to this channel right now and leave a comment below. We are dedicated to keeping the facts straight, no matter how much the left tries to bury them. Donalds leaned in and suggested that her calming feeling wasn't about humanitarianism at all. He accused her of seeing Jewish suffering as something that doesn't bother her because she views them as the enemy. He noted that she has spent her entire career calling Israel an apartheid state, which he labeled as modern-day blood libel. Tlaib stammered that criticizing policy isn't the same as hatred, but Donalds wasn't buying the excuse. He reminded her that calling for the elimination of a state isn't a policy critique. It is an advocacy for genocide. He stood up again, his Brooklyn energy filling the chamber as he paced near the witness table. He shared that he left the Democratic Party because he saw this specific brand of anti-Semitism creeping in years ago. He told her he had the courage to walk away from a party that was starting to embrace hatred of our allies. He challenged her to admit what she really believes instead of hiding behind scripted talking points. Tlaib sat there shrinking in her seat as the Republican members nodded in agreement with Donalds. He reminded the room that the Holocaust isn't just ancient history because survivors and their children are still with us today. He accused her of using their unimaginable suffering to score cheap political points for her radical base. He called her actions not just anti-Semitic, but fundamentally evil, leaving the room in a stunned silence. Tlaib was frozen, unable to offer a defense as the cameras captured every second of her defeat. Donalds then turned to a new file, one that dealt with the raw and recent wounds of October 7th. He described the horrors of that day in graphic detail, using IDF reports and survivor testimonies as his evidence. He spoke of the rapes, the beheadings of babies, and the burning of families alive in their own homes. He noted that over 240 people were dragged into terror tunnels, including American citizens who remained captive. Donalds pointed out that while the world watched in horror, Tlaib chose to defend the attackers within 24 hours. She tried to deny it, but he was ready with her own written statement from October 8th. "You did not call it terrorism, and you did not condemn Hamas. You called it resistance," he barked. He read her words where she blamed the massacre on the blockade and the so-called apartheid system. He accused her of justifying the murder of infants by repeating the talking points of a terrorist organization. Donalds then brought up the Al-Alali hospital incident where she spread the lie that Israel had bombed it. He held up the U.S. intelligence assessment proving it was actually a misfired Hamas rocket. We are halfway through this exposure of the radical left, and it only gets more intense from here. Hit that subscribe button and tell us in the comments if you think members of Congress should be held accountable for spreading terrorist propaganda. He asked her why she continued to spread that lie, even after our own intelligence services proved it false. He suggested the reason was simple. She wanted it to be true because it fed her hatred of the Jewish state. He stood directly in front of her and asked the most direct question of the entire hearing. "Why do you support Hamas?" Tlaib claimed she didn't support them, but Donalds noted that refusing to condemn them is a form of support. He asked 3 times for a simple condemnation of the October 7th rapes and murders. Every time, she retreated into legalistic language about holding all parties accountable under international law. Donalds shook his head in disgust, stating that she literally cannot bring herself to condemn baby killers. He told her that in her warped worldview, these terrorists are seen as freedom fighters and justified resistance. He reflected on his choice to leave the party in 2010, realizing now that he hadn't been overreacting at all. He told her she was the proof that the Democratic Party had moved away from morality and toward our enemies. Donalds then turned his attention to the Democratic leadership that had protected her for so many years. He brought up names like Nancy Pelosi, who dismissed Tlaib's anti-Semitism as her just needing the benefit of the doubt. He mentioned Chuck Schumer, who spoke against Hamas but never demanded Tlaib's removal from her committees. He called out Hakeem Jeffries for defending her censure as being politically motivated despite the evidence. He asked why it took until late 2023 for them to finally allow a vote on her conduct. He argued the answer was political math. They needed the squad's votes to pass their radical legislative agenda. They looked the other way while she attacked our allies and our police because she was useful to them. But after October 7th, when donors started pulling money and voters grew outraged, she became a liability. He looked at the other Democrats on the committee and noted their sudden, convenient silence. He called them cowards for knowing exactly what she was, but refusing to say it out loud. The atmosphere in the room shifted from international tragedy to the harsh reality of American streets as Donalds opened a new file. He looked at the woman sitting across from him and reminded everyone that she represents Michigan's 13th district, covering parts of Detroit and Dearborn. These are communities where families are struggling with real crime and real fear for their safety. He pointed out the staggering statistics, noting that Detroit's violent crime rate is double the national average. He then asked her directly if her solution for these terrified families was to abolish the police departments that protect them. Tlaib tried to use the radical left's favorite buzzword, claiming she wanted to reimagine public safety. Donalds was ready for the word games and pulled out her own statements from June 2020, where she called for the complete transformation of policing. He noted that she hadn't just attacked local police, but had also called for the total abolition of ICE and the federal prison system. He reminded her that while she lives behind private security, her constituents are the ones paying the price for her dangerous ideology. He accused her of prioritizing radical activists over the single mothers in Detroit who just want their children to walk home safely. If you believe that our police deserve our respect and that our borders must be secured, please subscribe to this channel right now and leave a comment below. We need to stand together against those who want to leave our communities defenseless. Donalds shared his own story, growing up in Brooklyn with a mother who relied on the police to keep their neighborhood safe. He told her bluntly that she does not speak for Black communities who understand that police presence is what stands between order and chaos. He presented DOJ data showing that cities which defunded their police saw immediate and violent spikes in homicides and assaults. He challenged her to give up her own security detail and walk the streets of her district unprotected if she truly believed her own rhetoric. Tlaib remained silent, unable to justify the gap between her personal safety and the policies she forces on others. The questioning then turned to the southern border and her desire to eliminate the agency that stops human trafficking and drug smuggling. Donalds pointed out that ICE is the primary line of defense against potential terrorists entering the country. He argued that by wanting to abolish this agency, she was once again choosing the interests of illegal immigrants and criminals over American citizens. He noted a clear pattern. Whether it is terrorists in the Middle East or criminals in Michigan, Tlaib always seems to find a reason to side against the rule of law. He told her that this pattern is exactly why he left the Democratic Party 15 years ago. He moved to the final confrontation, walking back to the front of the dais to stand directly in front of her. He reminded her of the oath she took to represent the American people and the interests of the United States. He listed her record of defending attackers, blaming American policy for hostage-taking, and attacking the very institutions that keep us free. Then, he delivered the question that would go viral across the globe. Are you representing Michigan, or are you representing Palestine? The room went dead silent as the camera zoomed in on her face. Tlaib sat there for 30 seconds, her knuckles turning white as she gripped the edge of the table. Her lawyer whispered frantically in her ear, but no words came out of her mouth. Donalds didn't let up, asking again if her loyalty belonged to the American citizens who elected her or the Palestinian causes she advocates for. When she still couldn't answer, he told the room that the silence was the answer everyone needed. He called her Hamas's congresswoman and stated that everyone, including her own party, now knew the truth. Don't let the radical left silence the truth about our elected officials. Subscribe to our channel and drop a comment below. Do you think a representative should be allowed? The future of our republic depends on our ability to recognize the canaries in the coal mine and act before the damage becomes irreversible. Rashida Tlaib is not an outlier. She is the most visible symptom of a movement that seeks to deconstruct the American identity from within. By exposing her inability to choose between Michigan and Palestine, Byron Donalds has given us the blueprint for how to win this fight. We must demand clarity, we must demand loyalty to our citizens, and we must never stop asking the hard questions that the radical left is too afraid to answer. The era of making excuses for anti-Semitism and anti-Americanism in our halls of government must come to a definitive end. As we close this chapter of the investigation, let the silence of that hearing room serve as a permanent reminder of what happens when ideology replaces duty. Byron Donalds walked away from a party that lost its way, and his journey serves as an invitation for everyone else to do the same. We are standing at a crossroads, and the choice has never been clearer for the American people. Let us choose the path of strength, the path of truth, and the path that always puts America first. Thank you for staying with us through this deep dive into the reckoning that Washington so desperately needed to see. Please make sure to hit that subscribe button one last time and drop a comment below. Tell us what you think the next step should be to protect our country from radicalism. We value your participation in this community of patriots and look forward to bringing you more of the truth that the mainstream media refuses to cover. The silence that Representative Tlaib left behind in the House Oversight Committee room was more than just a momentary defeat for one politician. It was a loud and clear signal that the tide is finally turning in the United States. As we move deeper into 2026, the American people are no longer willing to accept the radicalism that has been allowed to fester in our halls of government for far too long. We are seeing a historic awakening among voters of all backgrounds who realize that the survival of our republic depends on leaders who have the courage to stand up for the truth. Byron Donalds has provided the roadmap for a new kind of leadership that refuses to be intimidated by the mob or the mainstream media. His systematic exposure of the squad's true nature has opened the eyes of millions who were previously blind to the rot within the radical left. The political landscape of 2026 is being shaped by the realization that we cannot afford to have representatives who prioritize foreign interests over the safety of our own citizens. When a member of Congress cannot choose between their own district in Michigan and a foreign cause, they have forfeited their right to lead in this country. The American people are demanding a return to common sense, where our borders are secure, our police are respected, and our allies are supported without hesitation. This is the movement that Byron Donalds helped ignite 15 years ago when he walked away from a party that had abandoned its principles. Today, that movement is growing into a powerful force that will define the future of our nation for generations to come. If you believe that America's best days are still ahead of us if we stand for the truth, please subscribe to this channel and leave your final thoughts in the comments below. Your support is what allows us to keep bringing you these deep dive investigations into the heart of Washington. We must remain vigilant because the radical left will not give up their power without a fight. They will continue to try and rewrite our history and demonize anyone who dares to challenge their narrative. But they no longer have the benefit of operating in the shadows. The mask has been ripped away, and the truth is out for everyone to see. The censure of Rashida Tlaib was just the beginning of a larger reckoning that is coming for every extremist who tries to undermine our values. We are reclaiming our government, one hearing and one vote at a time, and we are doing it with the same spirit of independence that built this country. As you reflect on the events of this historic hearing, remember that the power to change our country lies in your hands. You have the power to support leaders who put America first and to hold accountable those who refuse to do so. The journey of Byron Donalds, from a kid in Brooklyn to a lion in the halls of Congress, is proof that anyone can make a difference if they have the courage to speak up. Let his example inspire you to stay informed, stay engaged, and never stop fighting for the principles that make the United States the greatest nation on earth. Thank you for being a part of this community of patriots and for your commitment to the truth. Make sure you have subscribed and hit that notification bell so you never miss an update on the fight for our nation's soul. Comment below with the word patriot if you stand with Byron Donalds and want to see more accountability in Washington. We are in this together, and together we will ensure that the light of truth continues to shine on our great republic.